steak and mushrooms, an all-time classic. But here we make a wine-reduced sauce, which has an intensity which will absolutely delight you. First, clean and cut your mushrooms. Just roughly chop them. We'll use half in the pressure cooker and half in the sauce that we make. Right, moving on. We're going to take a shallot here, which is a sweeter and gentler tasting sort of onion. If you don't have a shallot, a red onion is fine. Peel and prep the onion or the shallot just as you would normally do, roughly diced, and then let's move on to the next step. In making this classic steak and mushroom, use another classic ingredient, garlic. So here we're going to peel the garlic and we'll roughly chop it and then set it aside for a little bit later when we're doing our sautéing in the pan. It really does seem like I'm using the word classic a lot. However, what's more classic than bacon? So here we're going to take a few rashers of bacon, and again, we'll roughly chop those up because they're going to really work well with the mushrooms in the sauce. One of the unique features of the bacon, as we sautéed it, it got slightly firm. So as I was eating the sauce, what I found, at the end of the taste, I got this really nice texture and a little kick of bacon flavor. It was kind of like having bacon bits, but better. The next step is we're going to take the steak. We're going to just roughly put some flour on it, and that does two things. It's going to stop it spitting at us when we put it in the Instant Pot, just to sear that steak, but more importantly, it will just help with the thickening of the overall sauce when we start to make that later, just having a base of flour in there. So pat gently and cover liberally the steak with the flour. As you're flouring the meat, turn the Instant Pot onto hot sauté because it takes 4 to 5 minutes for it to come up to temperature. Add 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil, and then when it is hot, in goes the steak. Put in the steak one piece at a time. Don't layer the steak on top of each other. So you may have to do this in 2 batches, depending on how much steak you've got. Once you've put it in the Instant Pot, just leave it there for approximately 2 minutes. You want to get it nice and brown so that firstly you sear in the juices, but secondly you're starting to release some of that caramelized protein, which is really going to add to the body of the sauce. So you can see here, we've got the steak in, we've left it alone, it's just sizzling away nicely, and after about 2 minutes, just take some tongs, lift up the edge, make sure it looks brown, and then you can turn it over to the other side and repeat that process for approximately 1 to 2 minutes on the other side. You can see as we're doing here. Once you're happy that the second side of the steak is also nicely brown, start taking the steak out. Leave the Instant Pot on hot, because the next thing we're going to do is straight away put in our onions and start to cook those out. The onions will take about 2 minutes and you'll see them start to go clear. And the next ingredient we want to put in is half of our mushrooms. Now remember, we cleaned the mushrooms either using a paper towel or a brush because we don't want to get any water near those mushrooms, because then they just absolutely collapse into a mushy mess and they don't release the flavor as well if they're wet either. So put in the mushrooms. They're only going to take about a minute and then you're ready to add in the garlic. And again, give that a further minute and we're ready to move on to the next step. Now we're ready to add in the bacon. So we're really starting to build a really flavoursome base of the sauce. Think of it. Onions, garlic, mushrooms and bacon. They all work really, really well together. So stir those around. Again, the bacon's going to take probably 2 minutes for you to get it to the right texture and to get it release all its nice flavours. And then the next step is to put in some wine, and that is going to start to deglaze the bottom of the pan, pull off all those nice caramel bits which add to flavour. You can see here we're scraping the bottom of the Instant Pot with the wooden spoon. What we're also going to do before we move on to the next step is let the wine reduce so that it actually gets slightly thick and viscous. And you can see here we're just leaving it alone, we're letting the steam come off, putting in a few herbs, but we're reducing that wine before we move to the next step. And that really helps with the flavour. So you can see how the wine has largely gone from this, I guess, base of the sauce. And now we're ready to put in the stock, because we're going to start to cook out using the Instant Pot and the pressure cooker to take almost any cut of steak you want and make it ultra tender, pull apart. In fact, I ate this using a spoon, no knife at all. The steak was that tender. Start putting the steak back in to this cooking mix. First, add a little bit of salt and pepper to the steak as you put it in. Not too much, because when we come later to taste the sauce, we're going to do that little by little, step by step, so we get the perfect tasting sauce. And seasoning is the key to doing that. Now, you can see here, we're making sure the steak is covered by the liquid. And if we don't think there's enough liquid in there just to cover that steak and let it float there nicely, add in a little bit more stock just before you start the cooking process. On goes the lid and you're ready to do the pressure cooking. Okay, we've finished the cooking, and I'm just using this tea towel to stop the steam coming to the camera lens there. Now, you can see here, just it's bubbling away nicely. The steak is beautifully tender. Gently take it out because it will be quite tender. And now we're going to move on to making the sauce, which is really the key to making this dish stand out from anything else you've ever had. So watch carefully as we make the sauce. We've reset the Instant Pot back onto high temperature saute. Now, as it comes up to temperature, Rose was just fishing around looking to take out any large pieces of herbs. Let's fold our arms and wait, because that's what we're doing. We want to reduce this sauce down by at least 20 to 30%. And what that does is it intensifies the flavor. Do that before you put in the cream. Talking about classics again, onions, bacon, steak, cream, garlic. This is a dish of the classics, and if you make it right, it is just divine. Now, this is the second half of the mushrooms that we kept, and we do that because you want a little bit of extra texture as you eat that. We're still going to cook them out because we're going to continue boiling this mix in the Instant Pot, so the mushrooms will soften up. The mushrooms that we put in earlier in the pressure cooker have largely gone and released their flavor within the sauce, and that's one of the reasons that makes this sauce so amazing. Now you can see that the sauce has actually reduced quite a lot here, and in the final step we're popping back in the steak so that again it absorbs all of these beautiful sauce dishes, and we're going to be ready to plate on up. So thank you for watching. We're serving this with some nice roasted polenta and some tomatoes. If you like this, please give us a thumbs up and look to join our channel. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.